I was listening to Andrew Bolt the other day in the aftermath of the New Zealand shootings, and the discussion got around to identity politics. And like a lot of what I describe as faux conservatives, Andrew Bolt, along with the likes of Sargon of Akkad, lumped white ethnicity in with the usual suspects of identity politics. And I think this exposes an underlying flaw in the whole sort of conservative philosophical mindset.
And what I really objected to about this is, unfortunately, they pursue this very commonly held idea that when it comes to white people, what we call white nationalists, I'm a white nationalist, they immediately assume that a white nationalist is the same as a white supremacist. And this is complete nonsense, and it's really saddening that conservatives, people on the conservative side who really take their lumps, from the left, pursue this line. I am a white nationalist in the same way as black people in America and Australia promote whilst black people in Australia are mostly Caucasian, ethnically speaking, but black people who simply assert their concern to further and promote their black ethnicity is fine. They get a medal for that, I think, even from conservatives. But when it comes to white people, all of a sudden the rules change. And I don't know, I'm not quite sure how they work this in the context of the New Zealand shootings. But a person who simply wants to promote their white ethnicity without any sense of doing any harm to anybody else, the way they are just written off as white supremacists is just unbelievably asinine, because every other ethnic group is able to indulge this. And when it comes to an Andrew Bolt or Sargon of Akkad, the rules just change completely, and they seem unable to sort of factor this in to their worldview. And they compound their sin by utilising the terminology of this leftist communist idea of collectivisation. Now, what engages me about this particular issue and how it's being discussed now is that it comes right down to the bedrock issue of what is conservatism. Because I have a philosophical view that conservatism is not an ideology, it's not a political program, it's something that connects with enduring values and certain, you could almost call it tangible, concrete facts of life that do not stem from intellectual theory, and they are religion, ethnicity, and moral values. And when Andrew Bolt lumps these sorts of things in with grievance politics, the identity politics of the left, he is really witnessing to the all too common phenomenon of conservatives who don't get what conservatism really is, which is really sad, and they should. They are unknowingly testifying to the inability of conservatives to really grapple with what's going on in modern Western culture, and they would be able to deal with all of this stuff a lot better if they understood the foundations of what conservatism really is. And let me say, incidentally, that real conservatism is, in a sense, intellectually indefensible. But you've got to understand what I mean by this. You are what you were born, and any well-adjusted person will feel affinity for their own kind. It's not negotiable. It isn't some theoretical, philosophical hobby horse. It's a real, tangible fact of life, which you cannot be persuaded out of, or educated out of, or dismissed as just some faddish idea, which is why when Pauline Hanson came on the scene talking about limiting immigration, we shouldn't have governments just making rules and regulations about immigration. These are matters that go way beyond that. These are matters that should have been put to some sort of referendum, and should still be put to a referendum about whether we want to just completely change the makeup of our nation. You cannot choose your ethnicity, and it's not grievance politics for white people in white countries to feel sidelined by crazy mass immigration policies. This is something the likes of Andrew Bolt should be recognising and not just writing off as one other silly example of grievance politics or collectivisation. A person's ethnic identity is crucial to who we are, to how people view themselves, and it's a plank in my understanding of conservatism that it is an enduring value, it's an enduring thing. It isn't just some trendy philosophical fad, as are the other politics of grievance such as feminism and homosexual rights. And this all feeds into my grand view of what conservatism is, my triad of conservative values, not trendy ideas, but enduring values. The first is ethnicity, which we can't change, and we feel an adherence to, and a natural desire to identify with our own kind. The others are religious belief, a sense that there is a supreme being which undergirds religious belief. I'm not talking about kinds of religious belief. There's something you can learn in the classroom. But a sense that there is a supreme being which impacts on the way we live and should live our lives, that we are accountable to a higher power. The other is moral values. What I want to stress at the moment is the particular point of conservative consciousness, which is our ethnic identity. And many people on the conservative side of politics write this off because it's gone out of fashion, and that's all it is. Do you realise that in the modern world, patriotism has been completely negated, almost completely negated, well, in fact, in the case of white people, completely negated. Ethnic identity for white people and a sense of identification with our own kind is, for all practical purposes, considered to be perhaps a little bit above pedophilia on the scale of human behaviour. And we need to think about how white ethnicity specifically, how society has reached this impasse. When I was growing up, I used to hear about the Australian sense of fairness and the wider Anglosphere, the British sense of fair play. Australia, the land of the fair go. And back then, when I was a child, it didn't really mean very much to me. It was all pretty abstract. But I've grown to understand that there was a real substance to this characteristic of the people of the Anglo race. And returning to Andrew Bolt's take on this, how he calls for Australians to be united. It doesn't matter who you are. And I remember recently hearing about Hillary Clinton defining what it means to be a true American in terms of, well, you can be a woman in East Africa and be a true American, just have the right values. And I'm thinking, what nonsense this is, and especially when people still invoke the special qualities of being an Australian. And I think, oh, so you think we're special? As opposed to some other race. How do you arrive at that conclusion? Is it in the air we breathe, the water we drink? Or, what is it about Australia that creates this, special quality of being an Australian? Of course, the ethnic basis for this is completely ignored. Then what sense does it make? Oh, that's old-fashioned fuddy-duddy stuff. Oh, is that so? Well, why do they keep talking about it in that way? And of course, it's all taken for granted that all different ethnicities living in Australia are just going to have this curious sort of quality because they're living in Australia, when it's bleedingly obvious that the Australian identity we always used to have and still have in some degree has got a lot to do with our ethnic makeup. And the simple fact is that this is completely out of fashion because, like all of the values I mentioned that underlie real conservatism, they are what I label constraining values. Each of the three parts of the triad of genuine conservatism puts obligations on people which restrains and constrains their behaviour. Patriotism tells you that you may have to fight and die for your country. Religious belief tells you that you may have to live your life according to the diktats of a supreme being. Moral values tell you that you just can't make it up as you go, that there is some kind of universal moral code that will come to bear when you're talking about sexual conduct, homosexuality, marriage, the family, and so on. These are what I call constraining values, and they don't sit well with people in the modern Western world, addled by materialism and fabulous economic prosperity, the like of which has never been seen before in world history. They're the sort of things we need to think about, and they are what should cause conservative commentators to think again when they bag out white people promoting their ethnicity when they wouldn't dream of denying it to any other ethnic group. Leftists do this all the time. Conservatives shouldn't do it at all, and they should get their minds around what it is they're talking about in these matters and realise that ethnic identity is not some trendy fad that just comes and goes with prevailing ideas of fashion. And all of this is counterpointed with the cult of freedom in our morally anarchic Western world. The people who, in our culture, in our society, who want to be completely free, completely unfettered in their actions, not morally judged about anything. This is the true conservatism, is a complete affront to everything these people stand for and desire. That's all for now.